Miss Marshall, I know from having read about you that you began to sing at a very early age.
Yes, I did. How early are you going to ask?
Yes, why not?
I don't know. I'm probably 7 or 8. I sang a lot when I was a patient at Sick Children's Hospital, where I was a regular from age about 2 until I was 12.
Yes, that's because you suffered from polio.
Polio, yes. And I had an enormous amount of encouragement from the nurses and doctors at the hospital. And everyone who came into a new person who came onto the floor was trotted over to my bed, and I was told to sit up and sing, which I did usually. So I was singing a lot then, mainly things I dare say that I would have heard. I mean, I hadn't had music lessons at that point of any sort.
Of any sort?
No.
No piano?
No.
Did you come from a musical family?
Well, yes, in a way I did. My mother and father were not trained musicians, but they both loved to sing and sang a lot at home, and they both had outstanding voices. And then the oldest in the family, the oldest person, it was my brother Freddie, and he studied music very seriously, and that's how I came to hear music when I was very small, because he had records of everything that was available in those days.
Classical recordings or popular?
Yes. No, symphonies, opera, chamber music, everything. I heard everything when I was, and oratorio, of course, too, because he sang a lot of it, and he was a tenor and very musical, and because he was quite a number of years older, you see, he was quite mature when I was very small. And I think that was a great thing for me, because I realized that early on that I had this incredible response to music. And it was always my plan to be a singer.
Oh, it was?
Yes.
You knew that from an early
I knew
age.
I wanted to, yes.
Well, because this is a tape dealing with education, the most important question is when did you begin to be educated, and how did that happen?
Well, I think I was about 13 when I entered the Royal Conservatory at the first, and I went to study with Weldon Kilburn, who was later to be my accompanist on world tours, and also at one point he was my husband. And my brother Freddie studied with Weldon. That's how I came to be interested in having him as my teacher as well. And he was a wonderful teacher. He was very inspiring, and he was very intensely musical person, very, and wanted his students to develop a technique by which they could express their musical feelings. Because it seems to me that singers sometimes don't go far enough into that aspect of their work. They sometimes, I think, they feel, 3 or 4 years of vocal studies is enough, and it isn't.
No.
Not for all the demands that are made on a singer.
You have to be studying all your life.
Yes. And I think a voice should be, you can be just as much a virtuoso with your voice as you would be with violin or piano or any instrument. And that's the way it should be, because the music one performs makes all those demands.
Yes.
And if you want to really be able to execute the thing just physically well, it takes a long time to develop all that skill. And then your musical feelings and emotions are served, because you have the technical ability to do the things.
Yes.
And
Was he I'm trying to get a picture now of the conservatory. Was he trained as a singing teacher?
No, he was a first-rate musician and pianist.
Mm-hmm.
And singing was the love of his life. Like a few other people who taught singing, I can't remember his name, but I read Kirsten Flagstad's book, and she studied with a man who was also not a singer, but he was wonderful in helping her with her development, and it can be done. We had lots of arguments later on when I was not 13 and could speak for myself. But I think it's important to be able to do it,
yes,
if you're going to teach. But still, it can be done the other way too. For
yes,
someone who is so intense and so involved in singing, you know, it's
yes,
almost as though they are a singer, except that they don't have the voice.
yes.
Yeah.
Let's just try to paint a picture of what the conservatory was like in those days. First of all, it was located at college and university.
College and university, right.
An
right.
old building that's been since
Yes,
torn
old
down.
sort of rambling building
Yes.
with an annex and nice big rooms.
Yes.
Pretty antiquated even for then, I suppose, but I remember loving Studio 18 where I took my lessons because it had a lot of resonance, and
Oh, yes.
I always thought that helped me a lot.
I think it did.
Yeah, because it's so discouraging to have to practice or sing in a dead room, which a lot of the practice studios are now to save space.
Yes.
You know, it encourages a person to take more chances and to play with their voice and play with the acoustic.
Yes. I think you almost have to. It seems...
Yeah, but when there's nothing, when you're getting nothing back from the room or the hall, it's hard, you know.
Yes.
You can't really do it the same way.
Yes. Mr. Kilburn was a member of the staff
Oh, yes.
and teaching full-time?
Oh, very much so.
Piano
He taught
and
piano
voice?
also, yes.
I see.
I think he had probably as many piano students as vocal students.
Mm-hmm. Were you enrolled in a course, or did you just come and take lessons with
I
him?
just came and took lessons.
Because you were going to school, of course.
Until I when what they call the senior school was invented
Yes,
by Arnold Walter,
and that was later on.
and that was a 3-year course.
Yes. So you studied with Weldon Kilburn then while you were going to regular school?
Yes, yes.
In the evenings after school, I guess, once a week?
Yes. Once or twice, I'm not quite sure. Twice a week, I think.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then until what age?
Well, until I was, I guess I'd be about 19 when I went into the no, 20, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
or 20. I know I graduated in 1950, so
Yes.
it would be 51 or something that I would have started.
Yes.
I mean, 47.
47. 3 years
3
of the
years.
senior school.
Yes. So it would have been up until then. And then he continued to be my teacher when I was in the senior school.
Yes. Did you take piano lessons as well?
Yes. Yes.
At the same time you were studying with Weldon?
Yes, I did. I played not too badly. I haven't played for such a long time now. It's too bad. But no, I could accompany myself, and I always learned my own scores and so on.
Did you take them from him? The piano lessons?
Piano lessons? No, I didn't. I'm trying to remember who I did take them from. I can't remember. There were a number of people, I think.
At the
Depends.
conservatory?
No, it could have been at one of the conservatory branches,
Yes.
and I think I had 1 or 2 teachers at the conservatory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you remember, in these early years, before the senior school began, do you remember any other aspects of the conservatory that you could recollect? What about performing there? Did they have regular recitals, or did these students come together and...
Oh, they had, yes, they had a lot of performing. They had a nice concert hall,
Mhm.
and I guess the faculty gave their own recitals, and certainly the students did.
Mm-hmm.
And they had choirs and student choirs. I was in a madrigal group at one point, I remember.
Oh, yes.
And also in the choir. And there was an enormous musical life going on in the old conservatory. And think of some of the people that taught in those days. I mean, Healy Willan was there every day of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And Sir Ernest Macmillan
Mm-hmm.
was the principal, I believe, then. Yes, he
Yes,
was.
that's right.
And people like Ernest Seitz and Kathleen Parlow, all brilliant musicians. They won't come to my mind now, but I could think of many, many others.
Yes.
Reginald Godden was there, Alberto Guerrero, wonderful people.
Yes.
Um,
Did you get to know some of these people?
Well, yes, I did, and I was very fond of Healy Willan. He was so sweet, and he always called me when he saw me in the reception hall. He would always say, "Hello, Lois," and the reason he did that was because he didn't like to waste a syllable. So, "Hello, Lois."
Oh, isn't that?
Oh, he was a pet, and there were a lot of fantastically interesting people around.
So it was there a sense then of community, that you were all there together doing the same sort of thing, studying and practicing as
Well,
musicians?
I don't know if that's being too idealistic. I think there was.
Toronto was smaller.
Yes, and the thing that one remembers stands out particularly in the memory was the old cafeteria that they had, which was down in the basement,
Mm-hmm.
and it was always jam-packed with everybody, teachers and students all drinking coffee and arguing and talking and holding forth, and it was sort of what would you call it, the main artery of the whole place.
Where all the gossip went on.
That's right, yeah, that's right.
Oh, yes. I remember that.
It was a
too.
fabulous place. You wouldn't remember that,
Yes, I
surely?
remember it. I was very young when I went there, but I
Oh.
remember that rickety old cafeteria
it-
and the library, which was very small.
Very small, yes. But nice too.
Yes.
I remember that if one had a particularly good lesson, you might be invited down to the cafeteria for coffee, as a reward.
I see.
It was always lively. That's putting it mildly, but
I'm just looking at my notes here, and Dr. Mazzolini would have been the principal from 45 to 68.
Yeah.
So when you started, Sir Ernest was principal,
Yes.
but then the principalship changed to Dr.
that's
Mazzolini.
right. That's
Do you
right.
remember that?
Oh, yes, I do.
Mhm.
Yes, it was quite a funny business.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember. I don't remember the details of it now. I just remember that it was a very emotional
Yes.
conflict between those two men, wasn't it?
Yes. There were great problems. It's difficult to know now, exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But Sir Ernest, who had been, he'd probably been the focal point of so much of Toronto's musical life, not
Yes.
only academically but in performance,
Oh, yes.
went through a very difficult time in its period. Perhaps this is a good time to talk about him. You met him when you were quite young, I believe.
Yes, I did. I'm sure he didn't remember it later, but when I was about to start to take lessons at age 13, one of my school teachers took me into Sir Ernest so he could hear me and recommend a teacher. So I went in and I had to sing a wretched little piece that I had won a contest with.
Oh yes, which
And she insisted. This lady was a sort of friend also, and it was a very unworthy. I think it was called "The Fairy's Lullaby." Of it, I don't know who wrote it. It was just really
one of those little students' pieces.
ghastly, yes, terrible. And I could have. There were other things I could have sung for him, but she wanted me to do this one, and to please her, I did. And I think all he said was, very nice, small voice.
Ah,
Which, of course, it was. How could it be otherwise at that age? But, so that was my first introduction to Sir Ernest, and then I didn't see him again for quite a number of years.
I see.
And all those years I was working.
So you didn't know him, you weren't
I wasn't
well
involved.
acquainted with him at the
No.
time when Dr.
No.
Mazzolini took over?
No, I really wasn't. I mean, I knew him naturally by reputation, and I would see him all the time
Mm-hmm.
because he was at the conservatory. He had his office there, and he was
Oh,
there
yes.
every day. But I'm really so vague about the details of that, whatever you might call it. I would hesitate to say anything about it because I just don't know. You know.
Yes. Well, it was a complicated affair. I think Edward Johnson was
Yes,
brought in.
that's
and,
right. Yeah.
But Dr. Mazzolini did take over. Do you remember him?
Oh, very well. Yes, I worked with him. He conducted the production of Peter Grimes.
Oh, yes, that's right. But in those early days, did you get to know him, or?
Yes, I knew. I didn't know him well, but I certainly knew him from. I think I did a Christmas cantata with him at the Conservatory Orchestra, way back in about 1947,
Mm-hmm.
by Alessandro Scarlatti.
Oh, yes.
And well, that's the way I knew him. I didn't know him socially at all.
No. Was there, did you sense those, you were young and you weren't as involved in the affairs of the conservatory, but did you sense during this period when there was a difficult time and he took over that there was feeling of unrest and unease?
Yes, everyone sensed that.
Mhm.
And I seem to remember that there was an evening in Massey Hall, and we were doing, was it the Bruckner Te Deum? And it was, the audience got up and stood when, I think it was Mazzolini who came, he was conducting it. Now, I could be all wrong there. That's sort of my recollection. But it was all to do with what had been happening.
So it was public.
So in order for them to show Mazzolini that whatever was happening, they approved of him, something.
Oh, I see.
They gave him this accolade. But again, though, it's a vague memory. And it could be inaccurate, but maybe you could find someone else who, because it was a full house, there must have been lots of people around still that would remember that.
Oh, yes. And you were singing.
I was doing the soprano solos.
Oh, I see. So this was quite early on then.
Very much so.
So that means that during this time that you were studying, you were performing quite a bit as well.
Oh, yes, and during the war, I was singing all over with two army camps and
Oh, yes?
Air Force camps. Yes, we did. I did an incredible number of things like that. And also I sang messiahs here and there, I think.
Yes?
Yes. And I took part in student recitals.
Yes.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of work.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I always managed to perform quite a lot, actually,
Mhm.
even when I was very young. They used to call me the 14-year-old star of something or other, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That would be during the war, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is interesting because such things don't happen now.
No.
The city is bigger, but I'm not sure that there are many more jobs, and certainly 14-year-old girls don't get a chance to do that kind of performing.
I guess not. I don't know. It's very difficult. There aren't enough things to go around for the people that are working now,
Yes.
would like to be working.
Yes. And then there would be some people who would say that that's far too early for a young girl to be performing, although many singers did.
I don't think so. I think it depends on how developed the voice is, and my voice was quite developed in those days.
Mhm.
I mean, I had a range from about middle C right up to, I don't know, D or E flat above high C.
Mhm.
And it was very easy for me. My voice was very light.
Yes.
And I love to sing. I always wanted to soar up there, you know.
Yes.
And I love singing music with a lot of dexterity and scale passages. And
Yes.
quick thing, Mozart, you know, and Bach and Haydn and all those.
Mhm.
And I was really brought up on those composers' music.
Mhm.
That was another good thing that Weldon did for me, by giving me all this music to sing. That, I'm sure, had more to do with the development of my voice and my ability to move around,
Yes.
than anything else.
Just-
Scales included.
Doing it early.
Yes.
And doing
And
a lot of it.
I mean, it just becomes part of your being, you
Mhm.
know. And I try to do that with my students now too.
Yes. Maria Callas sang at a very early age, and I think there were many other singers who did, but it seems that now, for whatever reason, singers don't get that kind of
No,
experience.
and it's interesting to me here at the school to see that the singers around 30 are just trying to come out, you
Yes.
know.
Yes.
And that's about 5 years later than I think they were doing in my days.
Yes.
I think I was 25 when I sang with Toscanini. And that was unusual, of course, but I mean, I was singing a lot by then.
Yes.
All the time, almost, you know.
Well, that's another subject that's interesting to discuss, because Toronto was small. We didn't have as many theaters as we have nowadays. We did have the CBC,
Yes.
and they were doing far more in terms of classical music, original classical music productions than they
Oh,
do
yeah.
now.
Yes.
But there were, I suppose, then there were opportunities. You were telling me about your own, but can you extrapolate to other colleagues? Did they have similar opportunities?
Well, for one thing, as we were maturing, like
Mhm.
for instance during the years of the senior school,
Mm-hmm.
yes, they had the opera school then,
Yes.
and there were a lot of wonderfully talented young people around.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was Mary Morrison, Elizabeth Benson Guy, Andrew McMillan, James Milligan, John Vickers. That's only naming a few. There were
That's
a
right.
lot.
Yes.
And they were, yes, indeed, they had, I'm sure, a lot of work to do. And there was always something. And the symphony used us also.
Yes.
I mean, the first important performance I ever gave was the St. Matthew Passion with the Toronto Symphony and the Mendelssohn Choir.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were wonderful about using the talent that was right there.
They didn't import it.
No, not too often.
No.
Mind you, I'm not certain that they never imported, but
Well, no, but generally speaking, you mean to say that you
Well-
and your colleagues had this kind of opportunity.
yes, and the opera school, of course, gave not to me, but to the rest, wonderful opportunities
Mm-hmm.
to learn. And the other thing that I might mention is that in my own case, when I graduated from senior school, I had an enormous repertoire, and it was ready to go.
Yes.
It wasn't just studied a little bit, you know, I
Yes.
knew it. It was part of my bones.
Yes.
And I had a lot, I mean, all the standard oratorios. I had done them,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. So that when I did start to pursue the career, I had the work behind me, the repertoire
Mm-hmm.
to produce, you know, because that's the first thing a management asks you for.
Yes.
And when they say repertoire, they mean repertoire that's set that you can step out and do tomorrow, you know.
Yes.
And I worry sometimes that that's lacking today. I may be wrong, but
Mm-hmm.
you know,
This was
25 or 30 pieces isn't enough.
this was something that was encouraged in the school and the training of all the singers. Is that right?
I think so. It certainly was for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't mention the other wonderful woman who was there, Emmy Heim. You must know about her.
Yes.
Oh, she was just the most incredible artist. I mean, we were all privileged to have been there when she was.
Yes.
I mean, the students and the faculty members all went to Emmy.
This was when you were in senior school.
Well, before too.
Even before.
I
You
had private lessons with her before.
And this would have been strictly for the leader repertoire.
Yes.
It's
yes.
not French, just German.
Just the German, yes.
And what did she do with you? Did she teach you the language and the poetry as
yes.
well as the songs?
Everything. She used to say, "Sniff the perfume of this poem. Sniff it, Lois." But it was everything about her. She just was music to her fingertips. It was, I think, all she lived for. She was just steeped in it so
Yes.
much, and she had this ability to communicate it
Yes.
to you, or to one.
Yes.
And that's why everyone just learned so much from her. They would never forget. I mean, people who didn't sing at all used to attend her classes.
Mm-hmm. Just to learn about it.
That's right.
Yes.
And just to enrich themselves. And that's the way it was with Emmy.
Who taught you the French repertoire, song repertoire?
Well, I taught it with Weldon.
With Weldon.
Yes.
There wouldn't have been
And
anybody special for that.
No.
Like
no,
there was
No.
for German.
No. No, in the general way, we worked together on our repertoire.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what about language studies? Did you do anything formal about
Well,
Italian,
I had
French?
French and German.
Yes, not Italian.
Not really. I mean, somewhat.
Yes.
Somewhat.
We're getting, I should get back to the establishment of the senior school and the, how that whole thing came about and was set up. You had been studying piano and voice, and then Dr. Walters had come to the city, and it was his idea, I believe, to establish the senior school.
Yes, it was.
And this was in the Faculty of Music.
Well, that's what it was called later.
Yes. That's what it became the faculty. It wasn't at the beginning.
It was called the senior school at the beginning.
Yes.
But the diploma at the end was the artist diploma, which is the same today, I think.
I think so. Yes. So you, this was a new innovation, and it must have been quite an exciting one.
It was. And it was, I think, largely based on scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that my 3 years were practically all on scholarship.
Yes. And before that, singers would have simply graduated with their ARCT
I guess so.
from the conservatory.
Yes.
But this way, this school gave them a little broader and
Yes,
deeper
because
development.
there you see we did have classes in history and keyboard harmony and all the surrounding subjects of
Mhm.
German and Italian. We had French
Yes.
and never Russian, which I'm so sorry about.
Yes. They never thought that was that important, I guess.
But that's another subject we could get to later, perhaps.
oh yes. Yes.
But
And the French and language courses would have been taught by people from the university?
yes, the lady who taught the French course was Sir Ernest's sister.
Oh,
Her name, I know her name so well. Her name was Hill. Her married name was Hill. And I can't think of her first name, although I know it as well as my own.
I might come back later.
Yes.
And she taught French to the singers?
Yes.
And
She was English, but she was very good. Very good.
German, was that just with Emmy Heim or?
No, Greta Kraus.
Oh, she did?
Gave good German coaching to the music students,
Yes.
to the voice students.
Italian?
I can't remember the lady they had for the Italian.
Mhm.
I can't remember her name. But
And then
it was a pretty well-rounded course.
Yes.
And then they had the opera school for the people who they thought were potentially good
Mhm.
prospects for operatic work in the future.
Yes.
And they did wonderful work. I was always sorry I could not be in that.
That was impossible for you?
They seemed to think it was,
Mm-hmm.
because of my disability. I certainly never would have, because I could do anything, you know,
Yes.
then as far as movement was concerned. But, I mean, it's all, I never sat down and cried about it or anything, but it was just something you had to live with. But it was a disappointment, though, that they said, no, you've got to concentrate on concert career and oratorio and perhaps some opera in concert or on recordings. And that's actually what did happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The man who dreamed up the senior school and was the force behind it was, of course, Dr. Walter. Not an easy personality.
No, not in my recollection.
No. When did you first meet him?
I don't remember. I guess I met him when I auditioned to be admitted into the senior school.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any personal encounters with him?
Well, when you say he was difficult, he was a bit. It was all sort of, I don't know, I'm trying to find the words. I don't want to say anything too nasty.
We'll put it on the next tape. This is Valerie Schatzker interviewing Lois Marshall. The date is Monday, October the 19th, 1987, and this is tape number 2. We've just been talking about Arnold Walter, who I should just record, although it's easy to find out from publications, came from Czechoslovakia and had been trained in the German tradition. And unlike Sir Ernest and Dr. Mazzoleni, who came from the English tradition, he brought this, along with people like Greta Krause and Emmy Heim, to this school. I'm sure it added a new dimension that was probably helpful for the students.
I don't know that he brought in Heim.
No, not that he brought her, but she and Greta Krause brought this continental
Yes.
musical tradition.
Yes, true.
With all their knowledge of that kind of music.
Well, my own experience with Arnold Walter was not the happiest one, but I certainly recognized the good work that he did and the vision he had for the school, and the fact that he started it and it continues today is, I suppose, one of the most important achievements that could have been made. On a personal level, he was a very difficult man to deal with from my experience, and he was very unkind. That's all. That's about the crux of the matter.
Did he encourage you?
No, not really. He may have privately thought you had good possibilities, but he never said so. And I mean, I never even thought that I never expected that he would encourage me, and he never did. But it wasn't that. It was he had a sort of somewhat cruel streak that he could make you very unhappy. Just in the biting things he would say, even for minor infractions. He'd have you in tears and that sort of thing. And well, when I finished the senior school, I was very happy because I knew Arnold Walter was out of the picture as far as my life was concerned. It's probably a terrible thing to say, but he did make me unhappy.
That wasn't so with Sir Ernest.
Oh no, no, it was the opposite with Sir Ernest. Sir Ernest was a great friend, but he also gave me the first opportunities I had to sing in major performances, and that went on till Sir Ernest retired. And it was one of the loveliest associations of my life, both with Sir Ernest and all of his family. I got to know the boys and Elsie McMillan. We had lots of jolly evenings at their house at, was it Park Road, I think? Yeah. And no, he was fantastic. he could be difficult too, but it was in a different way. You know, he was very impatient if things were not the way he wanted them, and he just couldn't bear incompetence. He'd just throw a stick into the air, you know, which I think perhaps he was entitled to do.
He must have worked very hard because he was involved in so many things.
Oh, well, I mean, think of the things he did. He was the principal of the conservatory. He was the conductor of the Toronto Symphony. He was the conductor of the Mendelssohn Choir. And what else? He was a wonderful, marvelous organist.
Yes.
He was a prodigy.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
An incredible scholar.
Was he a good judge of voices?
I think he was.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was. He also adored Emmy Haim.
Yes.
And I have a record, maybe you've heard it, of an evening that they had when Emmy hadn't sung for years. I mean, she didn't sing, she taught and she demonstrated, I suppose. But they got her at this party, I think, to sing 3 folk songs.
Oh.
And one of them, the one at the end, was in Yiddish. And you should hear it.
I loved it.
It also a wonderful interview with Emmy, with Ronald Hamilton.
Oh, yes.
It's a wonderful record.
It would be wonderful.
It was made years and years ago, and I think Barry Morris, he's on it. I can't remember.
Narrated or introduced it.
Perhaps, yes.
Yes.
And
had she been a singer, Emmy Haim? Had she had a career as a singer
yes,
before?
oh yes, but not here. I think she did sing here a number of times. I believe at Hart House, for instance. Anyway, Sir Ernest loved her, and he played for her whenever she did sing.
Uh-huh.
And he was the sort of person who loved a singer who had a lot of, first of all, ability and talent, but personality.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember once in The Messiah, he always took Rejoice Greatly like a bat out of hell, you know.
Quite a tempo.
And I loved it because I loved to sing this as fast as possible.
Yes.
And
helps in that long phrase.
yes. And this particular night, he started it. It was so fast. He was doing the introduction, and I looked at him in some desperation. He said, "You can do it, my dear." So I really took off that night. But, he was, I don't know, I can't talk about him in a few minutes because there was so much about Sir Ernest.
Oh, well,
And he was the most incredible storyteller.
Oh, yes?
Oh, limericks and stories and funny things, marvelous humor, just wonderful.
I think he must have done a great deal single-handedly just to bring Toronto audiences to a point of sophistication.
Yes. I mean, I wonder what Toronto would have been like, how many years more it would have taken Toronto to develop into what it did.
Yes.
Without Sir Ernest.
Yes.
It would have been pretty dull, I think, for a long time.
Did he have anything to do with opera? Did he conduct any operas, or do you know if he did anything?
Well, I think he conducted some concert
versions.
But that was before my time. I think when Edward Johnson was still singing, I think they gave an evening with Lady Eaton.
Oh, yes.
I heard about it years later. Lady Eaton was a singer.
Oh, I didn't know.
Of sorts, I understand.
Ah, I see.
But and there were other operas that he conducted. I think he conducted Lee Willand's opera, Deirdre of the Sorrows, was it?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
But I'm not sure of the others. There were others though.
Opera was not his first love, perhaps.
Well, I don't know. He certainly didn't. As far as I know, he didn't conduct staged opera.
Mm-hmm. And what particular things did he do to help you along besides give you engagements? Did he introduce you to people? There's so much to promoting a musician, singer or instrumentalist. One needs to be introduced, one needs to be spoken of well, letters written. Did he do that for you?
No, I don't think he did that. He may have occasionally that I didn't know of. But I think what he did was he introduced me in a way that was the best way, because he gave me the opportunities to sing. And the number of people who heard me then came along and said, please come and do it with us. And,
yes.
and we're doing it here and there and everywhere. And one thing led to another.
Mhm.
That was wonderful.
Yes.
That, I think, word of mouth, sometimes it can do more good than brochures, or
That's right.
especially if someone's heard you and they've liked you. You know.
Yes.
So to get a splendid opportunity to perform a work with an outfit like the symphony and with this Mendelssohn Choir, where you're going to be heard by a lot of musicians and so
Mhm.
on, and managers, I suppose. I think that gives you a better opportunity than anything,
Mhm.
really. Later on, of course, I did join Columbia Artists in New York.
Yes.
That was a long time after.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
a few years after, I should say.
Yes. But while you were in Toronto, you didn't need a manager.
I didn't have a manager, no.
No.
No, I didn't.
Did you do recitals at this period, this early period in Toronto?
Yes,
Song recitals?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and
Were they popular in those days?
they were.
They're
yes.
not now.
Sad to say, they're not now.
No.
No, they were very popular then.
I have a feeling from reading, because I can't tell exactly. When I was young, singing was very much appreciated in my own home with opera records. But I also have a feeling from reading that singers were they didn't have the same kind of following as rock stars have now, but they had fans, and people flocked to hear song recitals by famous and not so famous people. But when you read about people like John McCormack and
Yeah.
there seems to have been a great love of the voice
Yes.
and a great love of song that I think somehow has declined.
I think so too. And there were a number of people that we could say were beloved by
Yes.
the public. Marian Anderson was also one, wasn't
That's
she?
right.
And
Mhm.
Roland Hayes and a number of people.
Oh,
that-
Lawrence Melchior and
Yes.
those. I mean, people.
But then they came sort of from a more blazing opera stage and had
Yes.
more advanced sort of publicity just because of that. But just the singers that we've spoken of now were strictly singers, I think,
Mhm.
concert singers. And yes, they made an amazing impression. But you know what else they did, which I've talked about it a number of times. Did you ever see any of the programs that they had?
Well, I've heard about them, and I think they mixed a lot of.
Well, I mean, it wasn't highbrow stuff, you know.
No.
You might have got a group of Schubert songs here and there, but I mean, I remember asking someone. They were talking about Dame Clara Butt. Do you remember that name?
Yes, of course.
And I said, "Tell me something." He was raving about it. What? Oh, she was so well. What did she sing? I asked, and he said, "Trees."
Sort of sentimental
A little bit.
Irish songs. And,
I mean, things that people wouldn't dare to get up and do. But the public loved it.
Yes, yes. Well, it says something maybe that singers who do song recitals these days have forgotten, is that the public likes things that are easily accessible. I don't like that word, but and where they understand the language.
Yes.
And where the poem is not too far
Obscure,
distant.
yes.
And tuneful.
That's right. Well, I don't know. It's really difficult, I think. On the one hand, you just don't want to go out and do all that sort
No.
of thing. But on the other hand, people have left their homes in the middle of winter sometimes to come and hear you, and they come and hear you, and they don't know one single piece on the program except perhaps the encore. You know?
Yes,
And then you think, well, that's not really fair.
yes.
And some of them love it. I'm sure they love it, and they love to hear you. But the response you get sometimes I'm really speaking more of North America than probably Europe.
Yes.
Because there the audiences are more familiar, certainly with the leader repertoire and so on.
That's right.
But here, I mean, you work so hard during a recital. You give everything that you have in your being, in your soul, and you come out maybe at the end and sing a folk song or something a little bit amusing or sprightly or sweet, and they come back and say, "Oh, that encore was just
That's
beautiful.
right.
Oh, I'm going to take that home with me. I'll never forget it.
Yes.
And, 30 years later, after my first tours, when I made my farewell tour, I still heard that sort of thing. I remember the encore you did when you came out here in 1949.
Yes.
And they remember it.
Yes.
That's not all they remember, but I'm just making the point that I think we should maybe do something about that.
I think there's a message there. I think you're quite right.
A lot of people today are going out with show things.
Yes.
But
But they're not really the right things for classically
No.
trained voices.
no, that's really not the answer, I don't think.
No. I was just hearing a recording that Carrie Takanawa did recently of Gershwin, and for me it's not a satisfactory Gershwin.
No.
Although she has a beautiful voice.
Oh,
and
she has a
wonderful-
ravishing voice. But again, I have yet to hear what we call quote-unquote serious singer
Yes.
singing nightclub music or, well,
Cole
cabaret,
Porter,
yes, successfully.
No,
And
just-
a lot of them have tried it, and to me, it just sounds horrible.
It
It's
sounds
false.
as bad as Barbara Streisand doing our music.
That's right.
Yes.
I'm sure it would be. I've never heard her try any.
Oh, she made a recording.
What did she do?
Oh, she did Italian songs, and I think there's some German later. They're all on the simple side, and they're not without. I don't want to say that she does a terrible job. It just doesn't work.
No, and it doesn't work the other way.
No.
I don't think. It
Peculiar.
just doesn't ring true.
Yes.
I was coaching someone just recently, and they brought in all these songs of Gershwin. It was just so stiff and you just can't sing them this way. I mean, what you have there on the page is more or less an outline for you to go by.
That's
You know,
right.
You've got to, if you can't play with it, and you come before the beat, you come after the beat, you come in between, but you don't just sing every dotted eighth note for what it is. You can't. I told, go into your Ella Fitzgerald, or here's some of the people that can really do it.
Yes.
I can't teach you how to do that.
No, you're being very fair. Well, getting back to these old days then, just before we leave the conservatory and the senior school at that point, what happened as far as you remember when Arnold Walter started his senior school? How did that affect the conservatory? Did you see that was going to leave the conservatory with less than it had?
Well, I wasn't terrifically aware of all those things going on under the surface, because I was just so keyed up with my own
Yes.
little world at the time that I wasn't involved in any of the others. And also the senior school was rather small. I mean, I think in my class, for instance, there might have been 6 or 7 singers.
Oh, who were they?
Mary Morrison was one. Louise Roy. Do you remember Louise?
I remember the name.
She had a wonderful voice, fantastic voice. She didn't go on, but she could have. Andrew McMillan, and there was somebody Hughes, David Hughes, also very good.
Yes.
It was Albert. He was a black man, tenor.
I don't
Albert
know.
Mason,
Uh-huh.
I think it was. He went to England and continued there, I think. He was quite outstanding, too. There was a girl, Virginia Lippert. I can't remember. How many did I say?
Oh, about 6 or 7.
But they were,
Yes.
I mean, each little department was not terribly large.
Mhm. Well, that was nice too, because then you did really get the attention of your
Yeah,
teachers.
Yes, yeah.
You weren't in large classes.
No.
Was that, when you finished the senior school, was that the end of your studies?
No. I went on.
Yes.
I guess I never stopped studying, really.
Mhm.
I mean, because there's always so much to do and so much to learn.
No,
And
but formal.
Formally, yes, it was.
And you continued working with Weldon.
Well, I mean, it was after I graduated that my career started, just like that.
Yes.
Practically next year, because I graduated in 1950, and I won a big prize in Canada here, Singing Stars of Tomorrow.
Oh, yes.
And then a year and a half after that, I tried for the Naumburg Award in New York, and I won it.
Mm-hmm.
And that entitled me to a debut in Town Hall. And after that, I went with Columbia Artists, and that was it. I never stopped afterwards.
Hmm.
So I was carrying on a full-time career from then until about 1979.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to explain for the tape that it's not the mandate of this program to indulge in a reminiscence of your career. It's too bad, because I think that would be a wonderful tape for anybody to listen to, because you've had a wonderful career, you met some wonderful people. But since we're sticking with the Royal Conservatory at the University of Toronto, I'd like to come back to when you got back to it, whenever that would have been.
Well, rather recently, I
Mhm.
expect, because I'm teaching now here, but it's only been for the last year and a half.
And do you enjoy it?
Very much, very
Yes.
much. I was very shy of teaching, and actually it was Greta Kraus who pushed me and urged me to try it, and she said, I know you'll love it, you've got to do it, and she was right. And it's strange, the dean gave a little reception last week for Oscar Moravitz, who had been awarded
Yes, anyway.
And for the Toronto Arts Awards, which I received.
Which you received, yes.
And there I saw people, it's like coming full circle. So many people that you don't see for, what, 30, more than 30 years, 35. And there they were, and it seemed strange, like not coming home, but it was a strange feeling.
Yes.
To realize that all the time that had gone between, and all the events, and then here we all are again,
Yes. But it's wonderful that you are teaching and passing on this experience.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it, really.
And I believe, are you involved at all in the conservatory?
No, not really. I can only do so much. I have 3 days of teaching here
Mhm.
a weekend. That's about all I can manage.
Yeah.
I get very tired, extremely tired. That's my biggest downfall, actually.
Mhm.
So I have to watch my energy levels.
Yes.
Sort of thing.
As we both know, the conservatory is trying to separate itself from the university and form its
yes.
own board. You're not involved with any of this?
No, I'm not, no.
Mhm.
The conservatory will always be dear to me because that was my home,
Yes.
for so long.
How do you find the students that you teach here?
How do I find them?
Compared to the kind of student you were and your colleagues were, are they different? Are they learning different things? Or?
Well, probably in general, they have a better education in general.
Uh-huh.
I feel sometimes that they're extremely young to begin in the course.
Mm-hmm.
19, I think, is the beginning age. And they seem extremely young to me
Mm-hmm.
at that age. Probably because their lives have been quite different, It's different when you live through a war, even though you're not in this country where the fighting is happening. Your whole life is affected by it every day,
Oh, yes.
and life was much more difficult when I was young, for young people, I think.
Mm-hmm.
In a general way. Again, we had to really deliver.
Yes.
We didn't have our parents who were going to bail us out if we got into trouble. We stood on our own, really,
Mm-hmm.
and we knew we had to. So I think we might have been a little tougher. But I have some students, though, that are so splendid, and they work hard, and they're intelligent, and it's just a joy, a real joy, to see them building a piece, one piece, an extended piece that they've worked on for a while, and how it grows and develops, and what it becomes. It's wonderful. I love it.
Where will they go? Where will they sing?
Well, who knows?
Yes.
Opera will be everything depends on how they develop, how exciting they are, how interesting they are, how beautiful the voice is, how capturing it is, and what they have to communicate. You know, I think it really goes back to that. Out of all the people that are graduating every year from all the universities, there's usually still only a handful that have, well, what we call big careers.
Oh, yes.
You know, and the rest, I don't know. They work. They have lots of work. A lot of people go in to become teachers.
Yes.
And
as far as as far as singing is concerned, though, I think it's mainly opera that the classical singers will find, because that seems to be have had a big upswing, hasn't it?
Yes, it does.
Whereas we've talked about the song recitals had a decline.
True. I think it's too bad.
Yes.
Because so few people can sing opera. I mean, in one city they have one opera company, and then people from all around the country want to be in it. You know? Yes. They can only have so many.
And it also demands the big voices, especially with our large symphonies and the halls that we have.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Demand big voices, so that the fine, smaller voices doesn't have that opportunity.
No, that is a drawback for sure. There are a lot of voices that seem to me too small to ever be able to consider a career in opera, just for that reason. The voice just hasn't got enough body. You know?
What about oratorio? Do you think that there's more or less going on than when you were young?
I think there's more, much more. I mean, think of all the regional orchestras.
Yes, that's true.
And the choirs and so on. Yes, great opportunities there. And we haven't mentioned the Canada Council, which changed the face of all music and art in Canada.
Of course.
I mean, my goodness, when I think back, when I was a young girl, there was nothing, absolutely nothing.
No.
I mean, there were scholarships from school.
But that was it.
But that was it. And I remember when I went to New York to try out for the Naumburg, I mean, it took everything that everybody could scrape together to get me there.
Yes.
You know, and now all the wonderful grants and things that I think it's just fabulous.
A different world.
Yeah.
The CBC is a different world, but not as good as it used to be. I imagine you sang a lot, and they used to produce operas on CBC radio, didn't they?
Yes, yeah. And they had the CBC Symphony Orchestra.
yes.
They can't. I mean, that's the government, isn't it?
They've cut the budget.
Cutting them back all the time.
But that's one thing I think we've lost for classical singers.
Yes.
An area that's...
And wouldn't it be wonderful if, I mean, with TV, to be able to have wonderful people doing recitals.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I think the public, for one thing, they would start to learn this music and love it.
Yes.
They couldn't help but love it once they had heard it.
Yes.
And but there's, the opportunities aren't there.
No.
And we put on an opera now and then, and certainly there are some good musical events on TV. But on public TV, I should say, I suppose. But CBC too. But there should be so much more.
And certainly, it would be a very good way of educating people to enjoy different art forms.
Absolutely. Even on the public television, they could do it there, surely, and they don't.
What about competitions? What is your view of competitions for students?
Well, I think everybody hates them, really. I mean, the idea of people competing with each other, but it does bring a lot of attention to, the person who wins it.
Yes.
And they have been responsible for starting a lot of careers that went on to be wonderful careers.
Mhm.
So I guess we have to live with that, you know.
There seem to be so many more than there.
Yes.
There's new ones starting up
That's
everywhere.
true. And someone said that it's becoming like the golf, you know, the pro golf circuit or something. There's something not very nice about that thought, isn't there?
Well, I think sometimes people think of it too much in terms of the Olympics. And
Yes.
I think there's probably a tendency also, because technique is the more measurable quality
Yes.
than interpretation.
Yes.
That technique becomes more important than
Yeah.
interpretation. But certainly they do, as you say, give a winner
Oh,
a
they
wonderful
do.
start.
Yes, they do. It's, you know, if you're sitting on a jury and listening to a lot of people,
Mhm.
and you begin to despair inside because you think, oh, well, these, you know, they're all good, and they all can do all this sort of thing. But you haven't been moved, and you haven't been excited, and so on. And then you think, well, maybe I'm too critical, or
Yes.
something. And then someone will come along, and you know, that's it.
Yes.
That's what you've been waiting for, because they say something more,
Yes.
much more.
Yes.
And there you have your decision. You don't have to agonize over it, you know?
That's right. Well, we're coming to the end of the tape, and unless there's something special you want to say about, thank you very much for helping us and
Oh.
participating in this project.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure.